The first time I heard my salary discussed in a room I wasn't in, something inside me shifted. It wasn't the amount that disturbed me, though the number was significant. It was the confidence in their voices. It was the casual, predatory ease with which they spoke, as if my life had quietly become a shared investment, and I was just the asset manager they hadn't bothered to consult. If you've ever listened to echoes of trust and betrayal, you know the truth already. Betrayal rarely explodes into your life like a thunderclap. It creeps in silently, disguised as normal family conversations, hidden behind the polite smiles of people who claim to love you, until one single moment pulls back the curtain and reveals the calculation underneath. My name is Selene Marlowe, and this is the story of how a marriage I believed was built on partnership turned out to be built on a balance sheet. By the time I understood the game being played, my husband's family had already made decisions about my future, my home, and my bank account without ever asking me. Before we pull back the veil on the Varelli family's strategic union, I have to ask, have you ever felt like a partner in your relationship, or just a resource? Have you ever caught your in-laws or your spouse planning your life behind your back? Let me know in the comments. We need to talk about the price of family loyalty. It began at a Sunday dinner. Nothing unusual, or so I thought. My husband, Adrian, always insisted we attend these weekly gatherings at his parents' estate. It was a ritual. His mother, Celestine Varelli, loved to host elaborate meals where the silver was always polished to a blinding shine, and the scent of rosemary and garlic filled the air like a thick, aromatic fog. His father, Roland, didn't just talk, he pitched. Every conversation between bites of medium-rare roast was an investment opportunity, a market analysis, or a critique of someone else's poor fiscal management. And then there was Maritza, Adrian's younger sister. She rarely spoke to me directly, but she observed. She watched how I held my glass, how I reacted to Roland's boasts, with a quiet, hungry intensity that always made the back of my neck prickle. I had learned to play my role well over the 3 years I'd been a Varelli. I smiled, I complimented the vintage, I avoided anything that could be construed as controversial. And above all, I followed the unspoken rule of the house: never mention money. That night, however, the rule was broken, and I wasn't the one who broke it. "Selene must be doing very well now," Roland said, his voice cutting through the clinking of silverware as he sliced into the meat. Adrian mentioned the promotion. My fork paused in midair. A piece of roasted potato sat there, suddenly heavy. Adrian had promised me, vowed to me, that he hadn't told anyone the details of my new VP role yet. We had agreed to keep the salary and the bonus structure private until we decided how we wanted to handle the transition. "Yes," Celestine chimed in, her tone a sugar-sweet poison. "We're all so proud. Such a high salary for someone so young. Quite impressive, really. Most people don't see those numbers until their 50s. My stomach tightened into a hard, cold knot. "How much was the increase again?" Maritza asked. She swirled her red wine slowly, her eyes fixed on mine like a predator watching a rabbit. I glanced at Adrian. My husband, the man I shared a bed with, wouldn't look at me. He was suddenly very interested in his peas. "It's not really something we discuss openly," I said gently, forcing a polite, socialite smile. Roland chuckled, a deep, patronizing sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, Selene, we're family now. Between these walls, there shouldn't be secrets. Secrets are for people who don't trust each other." The word secrets lingered in the air, vibrating like a struck tuning fork. "It's nothing dramatic," Adrian finally muttered, clearing his throat. "Just a step up." But Roland leaned forward, his elbows on the table, invading my space. 6 figures, wasn't it? Well into the mid-sixes with the performance bonuses? The silence that followed was the kind that hums loudly in your ears. I felt exposed, not because of the money itself, but because of the realization that my private life, my hard work, my late nights, my stress, had been served up as a side dish for a Sunday roast. With that kind of income, Celestine said, placing her napkin down with terrifying precision, you two must be thinking about upgrading. This little condo was fine for a starter marriage, but a larger home, it would allow for more flexibility, for family support when it's needed. Adrian nodded. Just a small, almost imperceptible tilt of the head. Yes, actually, we've discussed it. My heart hammered against my ribs. We hadn't discussed it. We had mentioned in passing that maybe in 5 years we'd look at a house with a yard. We certainly hadn't discussed family support. The conversation continued around me, a whirlwind of opportunities, shared growth, and trusted circles. I sat there, invisible in plain sight, realizing that my salary hadn't just entered the room, it had taken my seat at the table, and the Varellis were already deciding how to carve it up. The drive home from that dinner was a masterclass in gaslighting. Adrian kept the radio at a low, pleasant hum, acting as if we had just discussed the weather instead of my autonomy. When I finally found my voice to tell him he had betrayed our privacy, he didn't apologize. He sighed. It was the sigh of a man burdened by an emotional wife. "They're just excited for us, Selene," he said, his eyes fixed on the road. "Stop making it a conspiracy. We're a family. Their success is ours, and ours is theirs." "No, Adrian," I replied, staring at my reflection in the dark window. "Their success seems to be built on my paycheck. There is no ours in a conversation I wasn't invited to." He didn't speak for the rest of the night. Weeks passed, and the subtle pressure turned into a coordinated campaign. Celestine began forwarding Zillow listings for sprawling estates in gated communities, homes that would require every cent of my new salary to maintain. Roland sent educational articles about the benefits of family-managed hedge funds. Maritza started tagging me in mood boards for the Varelli Boutique, featuring floor plans and inventory lists that looked suspiciously like they required a massive cash injection. Every message was a brick in a wall they were building around me.
On a Tuesday evening, while Adrian was at his weekly racquetball game, I sat down at our shared desk to organize our tax documents. The computer was still logged into his profile. I went to the Documents folder, looking for our mortgage statement, when a file name caught my eye. Project Future Planning. I clicked it, expecting a retirement calculator or maybe some travel ideas. Instead, a massive multi-sheet Excel workbook filled the screen. My breath hitched. It wasn't a plan. It was an audit. The first tab was titled Income Projection. There, in a neat, cold column, was my salary, my projected year-end bonus, and even the estimated value of my stock options. It was accurate to the cent. The second tab was where the ice water hit my spine. Distribution strategy. Under my name, someone, presumably Roland and Adrian, had itemized exactly where my money was supposed to go over the next 3 fiscal years. M Boutique Seed Phase, $150K. Varelli Estate Refinance Contribution, $4,000 per month. Emergency Reserve, A Control, $50,000. I scrolled down. At the bottom of the page was a tab I hadn't noticed. Selene Income Allocation Strategy. I clicked it. It wasn't just numbers, it was a timeline. It detailed exactly how Adrian was supposed to encourage my career growth to hit certain milestones. It noted when I should ask for my next raise. It even had a notes section. Selene may resist the refinance initially. Use future stability and family legacy as primary motivators. Remind her of the startup support.
The timestamp at the bottom of the file made the room spin. It was dated 3 months before I even got the promotion. They weren't celebrating my success. They had been forecasting it like a crop yield. They had sat at those Sunday dinners, smiling and passing the roast, while in the background, they were already spending money I hadn't even earned yet. I sat in the dark office, the blue light of the screen making my skin look like marble. I realized then that I wasn't a wife to Adrian. I was a high-yield savings account with a wedding ring. Adrian's racquetball bag hit the floor in the hallway. The front door clicked shut. "Hey, honey," he called out, his voice cheerful and light. "You wouldn't believe the game I had today. My backhand is finally back." I didn't move. I didn't close the laptop. I just sat there, waiting for the architect of my life to walk into the room and explain the strategy. Adrian stopped dead in the doorway. The cheerful whistle he'd been carrying from the hallway died instantly as his eyes moved from my face to the glowing monitor. For a heartbeat, there was a flicker of something. Guilt, perhaps. But it was quickly smoothed over by that practiced Pirelli brand composure. "Here in my private folder, Selene," he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was disappointed, as if I were the one who had committed the breach of trust. "I was looking for the mortgage statement, Adrian. I didn't realize our mortgage had been replaced by a Varelli estate refinance plan," I said, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. I gestured to the screen. "Care to explain why my bonus is already earmarked for your sister's boutique?" Adrian dropped his bag and walked into the room, leaning over the desk to close the laptop lid. He didn't snap it shut. He lowered it gently, as if he were tucking a secret back into bed. "It's just a draft, Selene. It's a vision for our collective future. My father has a lot of experience in wealth management, and he's just trying to ensure that we don't waste this opportunity." "This isn't an opportunity," I snapped, standing up so I could look him in the eye. "It's a heist. You've mapped out my entire career trajectory like a corporate merger. You've even scripted our conversations. Use future stability as a motivator? Is that what our marriage is to you? A series of talking points?" Adrian sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He took a step toward me, reaching for my hands, but I pulled them back. "You're being emotional," he said, the classic opening line of the Gaslighter's Handbook. "You're forgetting the context. When my startup failed 2 years ago, who was there? My family. My father floated us for 6 months so we didn't lose the condo. Maritza worked for me for free for half a year. We owe them, Selene. This isn't just about your money. It's about balancing the scales." "I supported you too, Adrian," I cried. "I worked double shifts. I was the one who managed the house while you were depressed for months. I never asked for a repayment schedule. I did it because I loved you." "And they love you too," he said, his tone shifting into something terrifyingly reasonable. "But in this family, love is shown through loyalty and security. You have the means now to make us all secure. Why is that such a burden to you? Unless you don't really see yourself as a part of this family." It was a trap. If I said I wouldn't pay, I was selfish and ungrateful. If I agreed, I was a silent partner in my own exploitation. I am your wife, Adrian, not your family's venture capitalist. If you want to repay a debt of gratitude, do it with your own time and your own effort. Don't volunteer my life as the collateral. Adrian's face hardened. The mask of the supportive husband finally slipped, revealing the cold, calculating son of Roland Varelli. "You wouldn't even have this promotion if I hadn't pushed you to take that VP track. I've spent 3 years coaching you, helping you network, giving you the emotional support you claim to value so much. Consider this the commission for that support." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving me in the sudden, deafening silence. The debt of gratitude had been called in, and the interest rate was my entire future. The following week, the atmosphere in our home shifted from cold to clinical. Adrian didn't argue anymore. Instead, he treated me with a distant, professional politeness, the kind you give a difficult business partner you're forced to tolerate. But while he was silent at home, the rest of the Varelli clan was louder than ever. I was at my desk on Wednesday when my phone buzzed with a notification from a group chat I hadn't realized existed. It was titled Varelli Legacy Group. The first message was from Maritza. Signed the lease for the storefront today. The deposit went through perfectly. Thanks, Adrian. Can't wait for Selene to see the floor plans. Then Roland. Strategic move. The location is prime. Selene, your contribution to the seed phase ensures a 15% equity stake for the household. We'll discuss the amortization schedule at Sunday dinner. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Adrian hadn't just considered the loan for Maritza, he had already moved the money. I checked our joint house savings account, the one we had been building for 3 years. It was nearly empty. $50,000, gone in a single wire transfer labeled boutique initial investment. I didn't call Adrian. I knew his excuses by heart now. Instead, I drove straight to the address Maritza had posted. The boutique was located in the most expensive district in the city. It was a space made of glass, white marble, and arrogance. I found Maritza inside, directing 2 contractors who were tearing down a perfectly good wall. She looked up as I entered, her expression neutral, as if my presence were merely a scheduled inspection. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she asked, gesturing to the ruins. "Adrian said you might be hesitant, but once you see the vision, you'll understand. It's an investment in the family name." "I didn't authorize that transfer, Maritza," I said, my voice tight. "That was our house fund, money I earned." Maritza stepped closer, her heels clicking sharply on the concrete. "Adrian is the head of your household, Selene. In our world, the men handle the allocation strategy, so the women can focus on the growth. You're the engine, I'm the brand. It's a partnership." "A partnership requires consent," I countered. "I'm not an engine. I'm a human being who was robbed by her own husband to fund your hobby." Maritza's eyes flashed with a cold, familiar light. "A hobby? This boutique will be the centerpiece of the Varelli portfolio within 5 years. You should be thanked for being allowed to be the silent partner in something this prestigious. Don't let your ego get in the way of your legacy." She turned back to the contractors, dismissing me as if I were a low-level employee who had stepped out of line. I stood in the center of that hollow, expensive room and realized I was being erased. I was the silent partner because they had collectively decided I didn't have a voice worth hearing. I was the bank, the fuel, and the safety net, but I wasn't allowed to be the owner. As I walked back to my car, my phone pinged again. It was an email from Roland. Subject: Sunday dinner agenda, tax optimization and property transfer. The silent partner was being summoned to court, and this time, I wasn't going to show up with a smile. The Sunday air was heavy with the familiar scent of roasting meat, but to me, it smelled like an ambush. I walked into the Varelli estate with my laptop bag slung over my shoulder, not a polite bottle of wine. The family was already gathered. Roland sat at the head of the table like a king in a boardroom, his leather-bound legacy folder open before him. Celestine was pouring wine with a practiced, serene smile, and Maritza was tapping away on her phone, likely ordering gold leaf signage for her boutique with my money. "Selene, dear, sit," Celestine cooed, gesturing to the chair next to Adrian. "We've had the most wonderful news about the mortgage refinance." I didn't sit. I walked to the opposite end of the table, facing Roland. "I'm not here for dinner, Celestine, and I'm certainly not here to discuss a refinance I never agreed to." The clinking of silverware stopped. Adrian shifted in his seat, his face flushing a deep, embarrassed red. "Selene, don't do this here. Let's just eat and talk like adults." "Adults don't steal $50,000 from their wives while they're at work, Adrian," I said, my voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. Roland closed his folder slowly, his eyes narrowing. Let's be clear, Selene. That money was moved to secure a family asset. It was a strategic decision made for the benefit of the household. If you had a more disciplined understanding of wealth management, you'd see that.
Wealth management? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what you call it when you treat your daughter-in-law like a high-interest credit card? I've seen the future planning file, Roland. I know you've been forecasting my salary like a weather report since before I even got the job. Roland didn't blink. He didn't even look guilty. A family is a business, Selene, and a business requires a plan. We provided the structure that allowed you to succeed. We gave you the Varelli name, the connections, the emotional stability. You gave me a bill, I interrupted, and you expected me to pay it for the rest of my life. You've itemized my bonus for the next 3 years. You've mapped out my allocations for Maritza's vanity project and your own mortgage. You didn't marry me into a family. You recruited me into a pyramid scheme. Celestine stood up, her sugar-sweet mask finally cracking. How dare you? We have been nothing but welcoming. We treated you like one of our own. No, I said, leaning over the table until I was inches from Roland's face. You treated me like an acquisition. You saw a young woman with a rising career and you thought, there's the solution to our cash flow problems. You didn't want a daughter-in-law. You wanted a revenue stream. I pulled a single sheet of paper from my bag and slid it across the table. It wasn't a mortgage document. It was a formal notice of account freeze for our joint savings. I spent Friday morning with the bank, I said, looking at Adrian. The remaining funds are locked. And since my salary is deposited into a new private account as of yesterday, the Varelli legacy is going to have to find a new source of funding. The silence that followed was absolute. Roland's face turned a dangerous mottled purple. Adrian looked like he wanted to vanish into the floorboards. You're embarrassing yourself, Adrian hissed. No, Adrian, I replied, standing tall. I'm auditing the marriage, and so far, the numbers don't add up. The fallout from the dinner was immediate and cold. I spent the next 48 hours in a hotel, but I wasn't resting. I was digging. If the Virellis viewed me as a business asset, it was time to conduct a full forensic audit of the merger. I started with the shared computer back at the condo, which I had remotely accessed before Adrian could change the passwords. I wasn't just looking for spreadsheets anymore. I was looking for the why. That's when I found the archived emails between Roland and Adrian. The subject lines were clinical, Q3 liquidity requirements, SM career trajectory, and most chillingly, the adjustment. I opened an email dated 6 months before our wedding. Adrian, Roland had written, we've looked at the Marlowe girl's background. Her father's firm is solid, but it's her own trajectory that's the real prize. If she hits VP by 30, she'll be the perfect hedge against the losses we took in the 2022 restructuring. Secure the commitment before she realizes her own market value. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the edge of the desk. They hadn't just been excited for my promotion. They had been scouting me like a draft pick. My marriage wasn't the result of a chance meeting at that gallery opening. It was a curated acquisition. Every memory of our early dating life, Adrian's constant encouragement for me to take the high-growth projects, his subtle nudges to distance myself from my low-ambition friends, was reframed. It wasn't support. It was grooming. I kept digging. I found a subfolder titled Asset Recovery. Inside were records of the support Roland had supposedly provided when Adrian's startup failed. My breath hitched. The money Roland floated us wasn't a gift, nor was it his own. It was a high-interest private loan taken out in my name, using my premarital savings as a secret guarantee through a power of attorney Adrian had convinced me to sign during our honeymoon for emergencies. Adrian hadn't been depressed for months because of his failure. He had been busy shuffling debt. The family support they threw in my face every Sunday was a lie.
I had been paying back Roland's generosity with interest through our joint household expenses for years, without ever knowing the debt existed. I was funding my own husband's rescue and being told I owed his father my soul for the privilege. By 3 a.m., my whiteboard was a map of a massive domestic fraud. I had the wire transfers, the secret loan agreements, and the emails that proved intent. The Varellis didn't just want my salary, they had been cannibalizing my credit and my future since the day I said I do. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Adrian. "Selene, come home. My father is willing to overlook the dinner outburst if we sign the new refinance papers by Monday. Don't throw away a legacy over a misunderstanding." I didn't reply. Instead, I took a photo of the whiteboard and sent it to my lawyer with a single sentence. "The audit is complete. It's time for the liquidation."
Monday morning didn't bring the peace offering Adrian expected. Instead of arriving at the Virelli estate with a signed refinance agreement, I arrived at my lawyer's office to initiate a counterstrike. "They think you're an asset," my attorney, Marcus, said as he reviewed the whiteboard photos and the secret loan documents. "They've treated this marriage like a leveraged buyout, but they made a fatal error. They left the engine in charge of the keys." We spent 4 hours drafting the documents. It wasn't just a divorce filing, it was a total reclamation. We filed for an immediate freeze on all joint assets and a notice of lis pendens on the Virelli family estate. If the refinance Roland wanted so badly relied on my signature and my credit, then his entire financial house of cards was about to collapse. At noon, I sent the first boardroom signal. I didn't call Adrian. I called the landlord of Maritza's boutique. Since the initial investment had come from a joint account that was now under legal dispute for fraudulent transfer, the lease was technically on shaky ground. I informed the management company that the funds were being contested as part of a grand larceny investigation. 1:15 p.m. Incoming call, Adrian. I let it go to voicemail. 1:20 p.m. Incoming call, Roland. I blocked the number. By 3 p.m., I was sitting in a quiet cafe, watching the digital ripples of my hostile takeover. Adrian's contingency card was declined at his lunch meeting. Maritza was locked out of her marble and glass dream by a security team that didn't care about the Varelli name. And Roland? Roland was receiving a process server at his front door with a lawsuit that detailed exactly how he had used my identity to secure his private debts. My phone buzzed with an email from Adrian. The tone had shifted from disappointed husband to frantic negotiator. "Selene, stop this. The boutique is paralyzed. My father's credit is being flagged. You're destroying the family. If you have a problem with the planning, we can sit down. We can revise the percentages. Just unlock the accounts." I typed back a single response. "The time for revising percentages is over, Adrian. I'm not a shareholder in your family anymore. I'm the sole proprietor of my life. See you in discovery." I closed my laptop and felt a strange light sensation in my chest. For 3 years, I had been the fuel for a machine that was designed to consume me. Now, the machine was grinding to a halt, and for the first time, I could hear myself think. The Varellis had spent years forecasting my value, but they had failed to account for one variable. What happens when the asset decides to walk away? Liquidation is a quiet process, but it feels like an earthquake. By Thursday, the Varellis weren't just angry, they were panicked. The Varelli Legacy group chat had been deleted, replaced by a flurry of formal legal notices. Without my salary to bridge their debts and my credit to anchor the refinance, Roland's carefully constructed house of cards began to fold. We met in a neutral conference room to discuss the terms of separation. Roland arrived first, looking older and less regal than he had at Sunday dinner. His expensive suit seemed to hang off his shoulders, and he clutched his leather folder like a shield. Adrian followed, refusing to meet my eyes. He looked like a man who had finally realized the strategy had backfired.
This is extreme, Selene, Roland began, his voice lacking its usual booming authority. We can settle this quietly. The boutique can be liquidated, the funds returned to your account with interest. There's no need for the fraud charges. The fraud charges aren't a negotiation tactic, Roland, I said, my voice calm and clinical. They are a statement of fact. You used my signature to secure a private loan for your own estate. That's not wealth management. That's a crime. I slid a document across the table. It was a comprehensive list of assets to be surrendered. The boutique, to be sold immediately to recover the $50,000 stolen from the house fund. The loan repayment. Roland was to personally sign over a portion of his own equity in the family estate to cover the secret debts he'd saddled me with. The divorce. A clean break, with zero alimony and a permanent no-contact order. You're stripping us of everything, Adrian whispered, his voice cracking. My family. We won't have anything left to rebuild. You have exactly what you started with, Adrian, I replied. Your own effort, your own time. The problem is, you've spent the last 3 years trying to build a legacy using my bricks. Now, I'm taking my bricks back. Maritza burst into the room then, her face red and tear-stained. You can't do this. The contractors, they've stopped work. I have inventory coming in from Paris. You're ruining my dream. I looked at Maritza, really looked at her. She wasn't a brand. She was a spoiled child who had been taught that other people's hard work was her birthright. Your dream was bought with my reality, Maritza, I said. If you want a boutique, I suggest you get a job and save for one, like I did. I stood up, leaving the documents on the table. You have 24 hours to sign. If you don't, the police reports go from my lawyer's desk to the DA's office. I think we all know how a forensic audit will look in the local news. As I walked out of the room, I didn't look back. I could hear Roland's frantic whispering and Maritza's sobbing. The Vorelli empire was being liquidated, not because of a market crash, but because the person at the bottom of the pyramid finally decided to stand up and walk away.
A week after the meeting in the conference room, the papers were signed. The Vorellis didn't fight. They couldn't afford to. Roland's signature on the settlement was shaky, a stark contrast to the bold, arrogant strokes he had used to map out my allocation strategy months prior. The boutique was shuttered, the marble floors covered in dust, and the lease was returned to the landlord. Maritza's Paris inventory was canceled, and the Vorelli estate was officially under a lien that would take Roland years to clear. I spent Saturday moving the last of my things out of the condo. Adrian was there, sitting on the edge of the sofa we had picked out together. He looked like a stranger, a man whose entire identity had been constructed from the expectations of a father who viewed him as a middle manager in a family business. Was any of it real, Adrian? I asked, pausing by the door with a box of my books. The early days? Before the promotion? Or was I always just a hedge against losses? Adrian didn't look up. I loved you, Selene. I really did. But my father, he made me believe that protecting the family meant securing the resources. He told me that a good husband ensures the future. I thought I was being a provider by making sure we were stable. You weren't providing, Adrian. You were harvesting, I said softly. You didn't trust me enough to be your partner, so you tried to make me your property. You can't build a marriage on a secret ledger. I walked out and didn't look back. That evening, in my new apartment, a space that was small, quiet, and entirely mine, I conducted my own final audit. I sat on the floor with a glass of wine and looked at my bank statement. The $50,000 was back. The fraudulent loans were cleared. My credit was restored. But the real net worth wasn't in the numbers. It was in the silence of my phone. No frantic group chats, no Sunday dinner agendas, no subtle pressure to work harder just so someone else could live better. I opened my laptop and went to the future planning file I had saved. I didn't delete it. Instead, I renamed it.
The cost of lessons learned. I scrolled through the tabs one last time. I saw the row for Selene income allocation strategy. I highlighted the entire sheet and pressed a single key. Delete. The screen went white. The formula was gone. The strategy was dead. I realized then that the Varellis had been right about one thing. Investments are safer when they stay within trusted circles. They just didn't realize that the only person I needed to trust with my future was myself. I wasn't an asset to be managed or a resource to be allocated. I was the architect, the builder, and the sole owner of my life. I closed the laptop and looked out the window at the city lights. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't forecasting. I was just living. 6 months later, the name Varelli had faded from my daily vocabulary, replaced by the rhythmic, peaceful hum of a life reclaimed. I had moved into a permanent space, not a gated estate designed for flexibility, but a sleek, modern loft with high ceilings and enough room for my own ambitions. I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold. My phone buzzed on the table. It wasn't a group chat summons or a demand for family support. It was a notification from my bank. My quarterly bonus had been deposited. I looked at the number and felt nothing. No panic, no guilt, no mental calculation of how much I owed to a legacy that wasn't mine. I simply closed the app. I had heard through mutual acquaintances that the Varelli estate had finally been sold. Roland and Celestine had moved into a much smaller apartment, their trusted circles having shrunk significantly once the news of the litigation leaked into their social world. Maritza was reportedly working as a sales associate in a department store, a far cry from the marble-floored boutique she thought I owed her. And Adrian? Adrian had reached out once, a month ago. A long, rambling email about regret and misunderstandings. I didn't finish reading it. I didn't need to. Some debts can be repaid in cash, but the debt of broken trust is a permanent bankruptcy. I stood up and walked back inside my quiet, beautiful home. There were no hidden spreadsheets here, no secret folders labeled allocation strategy. The only plan for my income was the one I made, and the only family legacy I was interested in was my own autonomy. I realized then that the most dangerous thing about the Varellis wasn't their greed. It was their ability to make me feel small for wanting to own my own success. They had tried to turn my life into an investment strategy, forgetting that a human being is not a commodity. I picked up a book from the coffee table, sat back, and enjoyed the most expensive luxury I had ever acquired: the right to say no. I was no longer a resource. I was no longer an asset. I was the sole proprietor of my future, and for the first time, the balance sheet was perfectly, beautifully clear. Calculation is a cold substitute for love. Selene's story is a stark reminder that betrayal doesn't always look like a secret affair or a loud argument. Sometimes it looks like a spreadsheet and a Sunday roast. When the people who are supposed to protect your heart start treating your life like a business transaction, the only winning move is to close the account. If you've ever felt like your worth was being measured in numbers rather than respect, or if you've had to walk away from a strategy that didn't include your happiness, let us know by typing sole proprietor in the comments. We stand with everyone reclaiming their own life's ledger. Thank you for listening to this story on Echoes of Trust and Betrayals. If Selene's journey inspired you to audit your own boundaries, please like the video, subscribe to the channel for more stories of hidden truths, and share this with someone who needs to know that partnership is about trust, not negotiation. Your life is your own. We'll see you in the next one.